There's just one chance. If you can scream, but your throat's paralyzed, try to scream, man. Cry. Perhaps if you didn't see it, you could scream. Throw your arms across your eyes and scream, man. Scream for your life.
So there have been just a few iterations of King Kong over the years. Some successful and some not so much. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly why the mythology of Kong has endured for so long and for so many generations. In fact, one could argue that the property is more popular today than it's ever been, with further Kong projects currently in the works. It has all the tropes of a great fantasy adventure movie too. Damsel in distress, knight in shining armor, mythical creatures, mysterious destinations, frolicking in the snow in Central Park. So I guess you could say the story is kind of timeless. A tale as old as time, if you will. But in 1976, one man broke the mold and dared to reimagine original producers Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack's 1930s monster movie as a politically charged 70s blockbuster. And now we have this scene. The legacy of 1976's King Kong is a complicated one, and I'm not even talking about King Kong Lives. But the still thriving popularity of King Kong owes itself, at least in part, to Dino De Laurentiis' bold revival. An important film in its own right that has gone on to be seen as one of the fundamental films of the 1970s, introducing a whole new generation to everybody's favorite giant gorilla.
Here's to the big one.
The very concept of a blockbuster had just come into the public lexicon in the mid-1970s with the enormous success of Steven Spielberg's 1975 shark thriller, Jaws. Big-budget filmmaking in general was not as popular at the time as it is today, so when renowned film producer Dino De Laurentiis decided he wanted to undertake a new Kong movie and spend $24 million making it, that's $106 million today, he was met with skepticism. There are really two accounts of how the film initially came into conception. One being that then ABC television executive Michael Eisner saw the original film on television while at home one night in December 1974, and there had the idea for a remake, which he later pitched to Paramount, who in turn hired legendary producer Dino De Laurentiis to spearhead the project. The second version of events comes from De Laurentiis himself, who claims seeing a poster of the original Kong on his daughter's wall sparked the idea of a remake after Paramount CEO Barry Diller suggested they do a monster movie together. Regardless of the film's exact origins, with both De Laurentiis and Eisner pursuing the idea of a King Kong remake, with Eisner also pitching the idea to Universal Studios, the property saw two films simultaneously going into production in the mid-1970s. Paramount and De Laurentiis' King Kong, and Universal Pictures' The Legend of King Kong, which was reportedly planning to be extremely faithful to the original. King Kong officially entered into pre-production in 1975 after a bitter and expensive legal battle over the filmmaking rights from RKO, with both Paramount and Universal eventually withdrawing their suits, settling on De Laurentiis and Paramount making their film first, and paying Universal a percentage of the profits, and Universal being allowed to release their own Kong movie a minimum of 18 months from Paramount's.
We know how to handle guys like you. I had to cut your tongue out.
Although De Laurentiis hadn't taken on a production of this scale since his adaptation of War and Peace 20 years earlier, he perhaps understood the culture and expectations of 1970s filmmaking better than any other producer, with such classics as Serpico, 3 Days of the Condor, and Death Wish under his belt. He knew that with the Vietnam War raging and economic turmoil plaguing the globe, now was the perfect time for pure escapism. Still, fans and critics were vocally upset that De Laurentiis would even dare to remake such a beloved cinematic classic, some even considering the very prospect to be a foolish endeavor. However, De Laurentiis kept the details of the production under wraps, with few tidbits being released to the public, leaving many to speculate as to what the iconic producer would do with the source material. De Laurentiis worked closely with writer Lorenzo Semple Jr., who had penned 3 Days of the Condor for De Laurentiis the previous year. De Laurentiis knew that he wanted the film set in the present day, and he planned to break from the original film's iconic climax atop the Empire State Building, instead settling his Kong's demise on top of the newly constructed World Trade Center's Twin Towers. Inspired by the energy crisis which plagued the 1970s, Semple reimagined the film to have a more political and environmentalist message, steering away from the film-within-a-film concept of the original and offering commentary on capitalism and preservationism instead. Semple submitted the final 110-page script in December 1975, exactly 1 year from the film's theatrical release. With De Laurentiis' first choices to helm the film having passed, who included director Steven Spielberg and Roman Polanski, the production ultimately found its director in the late English filmmaker John Guillermin, who was fresh off the star-studded disaster hit The Towering Inferno, released a year earlier. Guillermin was known for his efficient action filmmaking and would face tight production deadlines and technical obstacles throughout most of Kong's production. However, despite having his director, as was the case with most of his productions, De Laurentiis had total creative control over the set and overall creative direction, and the entire film from start to finish is truly his vision. After a long, challenging, and expensive shoot, filming from January to August 1976, King Kong's final cut was completed just 2 weeks before it opened on December 17, 1976, hoping to recapture the box office magic of its predecessor. De Laurentiis hoped that his big-budget gamble was about to pay off. The film opens as Petrox Oil Company executive Fred Wilson prepares his merchant ship for expedition. Wilson believes that a mythical South Pacific island known as the Island of the Skull, shrouded in mysterious and perpetual fog, may contain massive amounts of untouched oil deposits, and he intends to stake his claim. However, unbeknownst to Wilson and his crew, Princeton primate paleontologist Jack Prescott has stowed aboard, hoping to get a first-hand glimpse at the island himself. A violent storm strikes the vessel, and Jack is quickly forced to reveal himself to Wilson and the expedition team, where he shares that he believes the island is inhabited by a legendary great beast. Wilson, however, accuses Jack of being a spy for a competing oil company and has him apprehended. However, as Jack is hauled away, he spots a life raft off in the distance. They pull the raft to the ship, finding in it an unconscious young woman, barely dressed of course, who they carry aboard. As the unknown woman recovers, Jack reveals to Wilson that he's brought along his photography equipment, and Wilson agrees to hire him as the expedition's official photographer. Jack meets the young woman as she gains consciousness, revealing her name to be Dwan. You know, Dawn, but with the middle two letters switched around. She explains that she was aboard a yacht traveling to Hong Kong to star in a film directed by some guy named Harry who happened to have been watching the notorious 70s porn movie Deep Throat at the time the storm struck. She definitely wasn't going to do porn, though. Next, we see a 1 minute and 35-second montage of Dwan being alluring. Wilson and crew approach the island and head into the fog bank on speedboats. I like how in Peter Jackson's King Kong, it was like this 10-minute, multi-million-dollar perilous sequence where they almost lost the whole ship and everyone aboard nearly died, and here it's like this leisurely excursion. Once ashore, they discover a gargantuan ancient wall lining the coast of the island, showing signs of recent human repairs. The crew soon discovers that they are not the first humans to step foot on the island, as Jack had suspected, coming upon an indigenous tribe carrying out what appears to be a sacrificial ceremony. The crew is spotted, and Jack deduces that they want to trade several of their own sacrificial brides for Dwan, which Jack refuses. The natives drive the intruders away, and they retreat back to the ship. After arguing with Wilson over the existence of the rumored mythical beast known as Kong, Jack meets Dwan on the lower dock of the ship, where he's preparing to sneak away. However, Jack leaves Dwan briefly alone, and it's here she is, of course, kidnapped by the islanders and taken back for some good old-fashioned ritual sacrifice. The locals unlock the wall's giant gate, drugging Dwan and securing her to an altar on the other side and sounding the dinner horns. From within the thick jungle emerges the legendary Kong. A 40-some-foot gorilla who snatches Dwan from the altar and carries her back into the darkness. For the monster-sized wall separating the human tribe from the rest of the island, a 47-foot high and 500-foot long wall employing 100 construction workers over an 8-week period was laboriously constructed, costing the production over $800,000 to complete. De Laurentiis was also adamant that he did not want stop-motion animation used in the film, and special effects artists Glenn Robinson, Rick Baker, and the great Carlo Rambaldi were made responsible for bringing Kong to life once again on the silver screen. While at first building competing ape suits, Baker and Rambaldi ultimately worked together to create the full effect, with Rambaldi creating the intricate animatronics for Kong's facial movements, also creating multiple masks to accommodate a wide range of expressions. Baker created 4 ape suits in total, in addition to a specially designed undersuit with built-in silicone muscles. For the hands, the team used animatronic extensions controlled off-screen in order to maintain the illusion of long gorilla-like limbs. However, Baker not only helped design the suit, but donned the outfit himself on screen, winning the role of Kong after having to convince De Laurentiis that he was the best choice for the part, even after actor Albert Popwell had already been cast in the role. In addition to the ape suit, Kong was also portrayed using innovative animatronic technology of the time. The film saw the construction of giant life-size hydraulic arms and hands, also designed by Rambaldi, with the hands being 6 feet across each, and each arm weighing in at over 1,600 pounds. Building off of the technological ambitions of the 1933 film, an astonishingly tall 40-foot animatronic Kong, the largest mechanical creature ever created, was also constructed by Rambaldi, who had spent months preparing the giant ape for shooting. The creature required a 3.5-ton aluminum frame and was covered with over 1,000 pounds of horse tail hair, requiring 20 operators and costing over $1.5 million to construct. Unfortunately, Rambaldi and team found out far too late that it was almost completely inoperable and impractically huge, capable of only minor, awkward movements, and as a result, the creature only appears briefly in the third act of the film. And it looks ridiculous. Despite this, however, the gigantic mechanical dud was featured heavily in publicity leading up to the film's release. So once Dwan is taken, here the film explores the relationship between her and Kong, and it's kind of weird. While Kong and Dwan finish with whatever it is they're doing, Jack and several crew members transverse the island in search of Dwan. Meanwhile, Wilson receives the devastating news that the island's oil cannot be refined, and he soon begins plotting to nab the next best thing the island has to offer. The film kills the crew off pretty quickly this time around and focuses less on the dangers of the island itself, pretty much just cutting right to the chase. Jack and the crew encounter Kong while crossing a large log bridge over a deep canyon, and Kong gleefully fucks their shit up. While one surviving crew member runs back to camp, Jack pushes on, pursuing Kong and Dwan. More creepy staring. Kong suddenly encounters a giant serpent and battles it to the death. It's death, of course. Dwan is rescued after Jack is able to sneak her away while Kong is distracted, and the pair race back to the beach, a royally pissed off Kong hot on their trail. However, Wilson and team set a chloroform trap for the raging primate, one which Kong literally steps right into. Kong is locked aboard the ship and the crew heads back to civilization. And here we get to see a defeated and vulnerable Kong ripped from his kingdom, and it's at this point in the film where the audience gains most sympathy for the character, and we further explore the relationship between Dwan and Kong, and it's admittedly a little bit more sweet here and a lot less, gross. Wilson stages an extravagant international unveiling in New York City, and while fame-hungry Dwan agrees to participate in the ceremony, Jack refuses the opportunity. Kong is revealed to the world, locked tightly in a giant steel cage, so do I really need to summarize the rest of this? Kong breaks free, steps on Wilson, wreaks havoc downtown, nabs Dwan, climbs a tall building, even more creepy staring, flying machines with guns, and... It is interesting that we see Jack and Dwan rooting in favor of Kong as the armed helicopters rapidly approach, begging the attackers not to open fire, while in the original, our two human protagonists seemed almost indifferent. In order to capture this sequence, production designer Dale Hennessy utilized the official World Trade Center blueprints and architectural drawings to construct detailed scaled miniatures, also constructing several other sets to capture different areas of the complex. The production had gained so much buzz at this point that during the shooting of the sequence, while the production had called for 5,000 extras for the pivotal scenes, ultimately they amassed a turnout of over 30,000 people, and in fact shooting at one point had to be temporarily shut down due to concerns that the complex's foundation would collapse under the weight of the massive crowd. While actresses such as Meryl Streep, Bo Derek, Bette Midler, and Barbra Streisand were all considered for the role of Dwan, Jessica Lange, a young model and complete unknown at the time, was eventually handpicked by De Laurentiis for the part, which left many scratching their heads. Despite winning the Golden Globe for Best Acting Debut, Lange took harsh criticisms about her performance in the film to heart and took the next 3 years off from acting to study the craft. So her character isn't exactly flattering. She's written as a young and naive and frankly kind of ditzy person, and while Lange makes the most of her performance, definitely, she's ultimately objectified and feels less like a fully fleshed out and relatable character and more like a MacGuffin. Jeff Bridges, who at the time was known for more intimate films like The Last Picture Show and Fat City, had gained notoriety for his Oscar-nominated performance in Clint Eastwood's Thunderbolt and Lightfoot in 1972, but hadn't yet taken on any large Hollywood projects and was still very much working in the shadow of his legendary father, Lloyd Bridges. Jack Prescott, through the lens of the 1970s, is portrayed as a bit of a hippie, with long shaggy hair and carrying the film's environmentalist torch through to the climax. It is a nice change of pace, however, from the archetypal 1930s adventure hero Jack Driscoll in the 33 version, seeing a more unconventional approach. The great Charles Grodin plays the greedy capitalist Fred Wilson with gusto, providing a both humorous and menacing antagonist for the film, and offering a much less sympathetic character than Robert Armstrong's Carl Denham in the 33 version. Originally, Grodin's character was intended to survive the film, but test audiences loved to hate the character so much that they felt it was unfair that he lives, so the scene was re-edited to make it appear as if Kong crushes Wilson. As the titular character, Baker had to rely primarily on his eyes and body language to convey Kong's emotions, despite his eyes also being covered by thick contact lenses. Unfortunately, Baker was unsatisfied with the final result of the suit, feeling it was ultimately unconvincing due to rushed deadlines, and he credits cinematographer Richard E. Klein for capturing the final look of Kong. However, Baker would get another crack at the ultimate ape suit 20 years later with Disney's 1998 remake of Mighty Joe Young. Kong is portrayed sympathetically at times, but especially in the third act of the film, he just kills indiscriminately, much like the Kong in the original film. But this Kong is also portrayed, in my opinion, as much more human. He's humanized more, given maybe a little bit more intelligence behind his eyes. So that makes moments like this slightly funnier in a way, because he clearly does not give a shit. Renowned film composer John Barry was De Laurentiis' first choice to score the film. Barry had just moved his family to the United States when he was offered the opportunity to score Paramount's Kong, and intended from the outset to not recreate Max Steiner's iconic original music, wanting the film to be able to stand entirely on its own. Due to rigid time constraints, Barry was forced to compose the score reel by reel, a challenging process for any composer, marking this the only time the legendary composer scored a film in this fashion. Barry's score is epic, sweeping, and romantic, and certainly one of the highlights of the film, and definitely adds and provides the film the gravitas it needs to be a true standout 70s blockbuster.
The most exciting original motion picture event of all time. King Kong.
Despite being one of the most expensive productions in Hollywood history, the film became a huge commercial success, earning back triple its original production budget, going on to gross over $90 million worldwide. Critically, however, it was a different story. The film received scathing criticisms for everything from its performances to its writing, to its tone, and its themes. Many critics viewed the film with the 1933 Kong very much in mind, and fueled the narrative that it failed to live up to the original classic, a label that has unfortunately stuck with the film to this day. The film went on to win the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, also seeing nominations for sound and cinematography. The film also saw an extended television cut airing on NBC in 1978, with many deleted scenes reinstated and additional edits made to John Barry's score. The film saw release on both VHS and a bare-bones DVD in 2001, which had to have its original cover art changed due to the then recent terrorist attack on the New York World Trade Center. It has also gone on since to see excellent Region B Blu-ray releases outside of the United States, featuring some of the extended and additional scenes included in the television cut. With so many Kongs coming and going over the years, it's easy to forget what an impact De Laurentiis' take had on both the property and the film industry as a whole. Making a movie about a rampaging giant ape, but infusing it with political themes, star-turning performances, state-of-the-art special effects, and multi-million-dollar production value was an insane risk at the time. And even though now it may just be a relic of the 1970s and may lack the slickness of modern-day technology and filmmaking, to this day 1976's King Kong still doesn't fail to take you on an adventure and offers a unique twist on an old tale. Fun fact, Kong's roar in the film was taken directly from 1960's The Lost World, and Kong's grunts and vocals were voiced by actor Peter Cullen. So if you've had a chance, and you definitely have, to see 1976's King Kong, go and comment below and tell me your thoughts about the film and how do you think it holds up? How does it compare to the other King Kong interpretations? And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, feel free to click like below. Don't forget to ring the bell and share. And of course, if you want to see more videos just like this one, go ahead and click subscribe.